Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning, and thank you for joining us for our Washington update. Great update. It's great to see you here this morning. It's Friday, long weekend coming, so bear with me. My name is Tim Sink. I'm president of the Chamber, and we're very happy to have you here with us. I did want to thank our sponsors this morning. We have sponsoring Senil Napa, and David Siegel is here representing that organization. David, thank you for your support. Appreciate that. Also want to thank the Dupree companies, and Steve Dupree is with us this morning as well. Thanks, Steve. We have sort of a pleasant duty to perform, and I am going to invite Steve McAllister up to the podium. Steve is Senior Manager for the U.S. Chamber Eastern Region, and he's going to make a presentation for us this morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Again, my name is Steve McAllister. I'm with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I run the New England office, which is based out of Providence, Rhode Island. But I do have New Hampshire ties. I went to St. A's, so love coming back here to New Hampshire. I just want to take this opportunity and come to Concord today to thank the Congresswoman for her votes to support the business community, especially the small business community here, not only in New Hampshire, but across the United States. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce, we have over 3 million members, which are businesses, organizations of all sizes and sectors across the world. And each year, we have a scorecard where we ask members of Congress to either oppose or support particular legislation that will have an effect on the small business community. Each year, we let each member of Congress know we are going to be scoring this particular bill because our 3 million members plus support or oppose them. And I am proud to say that your Congresswoman won our award because she is a true advocate and has the spirit of enterprise within her. So I just want to highlight I would just like to highlight three particular bills that she supported, which has a great impact on our business community. The first is she fought to repeal the medical device tax. So this is almost a tax on innovation. We use the example of a heart monitor, all the different pieces that go in that. There's actually a tax on those pieces that build that up. So she knows that healthcare is very important and innovation is very important, so she voted to repeal the medical device tax. She also fought to keep the government open, or to reopen the government when it closed. Yeah. Which is very important to the business community. Yeah, and it's very important to the business community. We want stability. And you want to know that if you are working with the government or you're a subcontractor with someone who has a government contract, that you're going to be paid for the work that you have already done. And again, and she's done many more things than this, but I just want to highlight these three. She's also fighting to make sure that New Hampshire companies and companies across the United States are competitive in the global economy. So she was fighting so manufacturers of all sizes play on a level field. She's fighting tariffs across the world, and she knows that trade works and tariffs don't. So again, I am proud to present the Congresswoman with our spirit of enterprise, and I come here and I thank you for your great work on behalf of the business community here in New Hampshire and across the United States. Thank you.
Brand new trophy for this year.
Thank you very much. Wow. This is a nice surprise. Thank you very much.
Last one. Thank you.
All right,
Super.
thank you very much.
Thank you so much,
Thank
and
you.
thank you for coming here. Put it right up.
Thanks for coming to New Hampshire. This is great.
Yeah, no, I'm delighted. I am delighted. I was sitting there nervously thinking, what 3 issues did you pick? That was a very, very pleasant surprise. Well, it's wonderful to be with all of you. Can you hear? Can everybody hear? I'll be loud. Great to be with you in the Concord Chamber. So many friends in the audience. So I'm going to start with a fun fact, and you're not going to get the answer till the very end. But one person in this room I have known since I was 15 years old, and it'll take you a while to guess. But happy to be with you, and a lot of issues for small business, for growing strong communities, and I'm just going to go through a few of them, and then we'll open it up for questions and see what's on your mind. But I just have such fun feelings whenever I get to come to Concord for an audience like this, because I go all over my district, but Concord is my hometown, and just such a fantastic place to live and raise a family and start a small business. And I think about Lori Carey, and the first time we met, we were doing the big women's event at the Capitol Center, and somebody said, "Oh, we should have flowers," and I'm going, "Flowers?" Like, we had so many things going on trying to put this event on, and Lori came through. They were gorgeous. She was generous, and I'm thinking, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing! You stayed up half the night making those arrangements," and hopefully we got you lots of business out of it going forward. But just so many things, Steve, what you've done for Main Street, and thank you. I mean, we had a funny moment. I was with one of the candidates, Beto, I think, coming out of the bookstore, and there was Steve. And I gave him a big hug, and I introduced him. Beto would have thought it was my long-lost friend. And we're chatting away, introducing, and I said, "Oh, and he's a Republican." National committee man, exactly. And Beto sort of stepped back and looked at me, and I said, "But look around you. He has made this happen for South Main Street." And it's been so much fun bringing all the candidates to Gibson's and showing them what, development, redevelopment, whatever you want to call it. And it's so much better than back in the day when we called it urban renewal and just took everything down. Now it's like working with these beautiful brick buildings, and kudos to all of you, Byron Champlin and the city council. Where are you? There you are, and the mayor. And I'm sure the chamber was involved. But the Main Street project was, for as much as we complained about it over the summer, it's fantastic. It's just so much fun to go down there on the weekend and have it just buzzing. Have people out on the street. The warm weather is finally coming, but having people out. So let me just dive right in. It's a fantastic place to live. We have challenges, and ironically, one of the challenges is this low unemployment rate. I used to be the envy of my colleagues across the country when we were at 3% and then 2.8%, and my colleagues at that point, all across the country, we had people with 12% and 8% and 10%. But now we are struggling with a different kind of problem, which is going to visit businesses all across my district who are desperate for workers. And great growing businesses, a lot of good activity going on in New Hampshire, but people just feeling as though I cannot find the people with the skills that we need. And so that's been a big focus. I started out 6.5 years ago doing job fairs and trying to, help people find opportunities. Now it's sort of the other way around. They don't even have time to come to job fairs. Now it's about skills development and really focusing in. And I've worked with the community colleges. NHTI has been just a gem. We did get a $2.5 million federal grant to them, working on, workforce development. We're doing a lot down in Nashua Community College. We've got programs in microelectronics and advanced manufacturing where you can come out with a 2-year degree or sometimes just a 12-week boot camp operation, and they're going straight into jobs that are paying $55,000 and benefits and the whole thing. So, and then I was over in Milford, and this is something we could look at for Concord. They're actually, the high school is, they have a program similar to what we have here about bringing, job training and workforce opportunity into the high school level, they are placing high school kids into some of the manufacturing jobs over there. Just to give them a sense, it's not your grandfather's factory anymore. This is not a filthy, dirty place. This is high-tech, very sophisticated and fascinating. And you find the kind of people that like working advanced manufacturing with computers and all of that. So these kids are going to actually be paid, I think it's like 10 or 15 hours a week, and then they'll be able to go into the companies and come back to school. And they're very, very excited about it. And I think part of this also has to do with we were so driven, and it's certainly a worthy goal of college for everyone. But I think what happened is there are families that is simply out of reach and so burdensome. If the kids end up with, tens of thousands of dollars, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, it's just really hard to get started. So if they can start with an apprenticeship, a program through the high school, maybe a 2-year degree while they're living at home and keep their expenses low, and then over time, we've got this fantastic university system where the College for Lifelong Learning or going back, the credits are all being accepted now, going back to school to continue to grow your skills. So that's a big part of what we've been focused on. I do have some news for you, something that's going to be kind of fun. Somebody said, do you have any good news? I have some good news. This one will be very special for Concord. Chris Pappas and I have just reached the magic number in terms of co-sponsors for a Krista McAuliffe commemorative coin. And what it is, they don't do very many of these, I think maybe 1 or 2 a year. But we had tremendous support. Dean Kamen got behind this with the his first program, STEM education, and so it'll be a commemorative coin for sale all across the country, but obviously here in Concord will be really nice. And then the funding of that will go toward STEM education. And it was very, very warmly received by my colleagues. There was sort of an age, I'd go around to people my age and they would say, oh, I remember exactly where I was. I was in the 3rd grade or I was in the 10th grade, and they'd tell me the whole story. And then I'd go to my newer, younger colleagues, and they'd say, who is she? And I'd explain the story, and they said, they tried to send a teacher into space? What? But I think that'll be nice for New Hampshire. So we'll keep you posted. We'll get it passed in the House, and then Jean Shaheen and Maggie Hassan will help us get it done in the Senate. What I'm doing a lot of work on, so the big change, first of all, it's great for me being in the majority. It does have a different feel to it, and I won't get way into it unless you want to in the questions, but if you watch the news at all, it's obviously a challenging time, and I think I'm every day more of a fan of our Constitution and the balance of powers and making sure that, everyone can be heard. I think what's challenging about that is this sort of gridlock, and I want to talk a little bit about how I keep working forward, keep getting the job done, even though we're in a challenging situation. The Senate is not taking up the legislation that we're sending over, and so I just keep looking for those bipartisan opportunities where we can actually get the job done. But the big change for me is that I've moved up in the world to one of the exclusive committees. It's called Energy and Commerce, so it has all of the business issues come through there. And it's, if you remember a congressman named John Dingell, it's just this incredible jurisdiction. He joked, if it moved, it was in his jurisdiction. If it didn't move, it was in his jurisdiction. So we have all of the health care. I'm on the health subcommittee, so we're working very hard right now on stabilizing the Affordable Care Act and pushing back on the sort of sabotage from the Trump administration. I had the opportunity to carry the bill 2 weeks ago that was the protecting Americans with pre-existing conditions, because they were sort of chipping away at that protection And that to me is fundamental in moving forward and making sure families get the protection, the coverage they need. But we also, we're working on reinsurance. We've passed legislation to try to bring the rates down, but make sure everybody gets the opportunity to get coverage. And then the biggest one, you've probably been reading about this, Medicare for All. I can say, as a member of the Democratic caucus, that's not going to happen this year. I don't expect, I try to tell my kids and my colleagues, there's not a switch in Washington, D.C. where we wake up in the morning in Canada. But, the point is, we've got to deal with the reality of where we are. But I think what we will see is a robust discussion about a public option. And what it may look like is that you could pay a premium to get into Medicare until age 65. And you would get the benefits of that healthcare system without paying the advertising and marketing and costs that are in the private insurance world. And then theoretically, what that would do is create competition with the insurance companies and help to bring down rates and give an option for people. And to me, that would be a great sort of pilot project, if you will, because you'd be able to watch if people move to that, if that was their choice, and you'd be able to see if it's successful and then decide if that's a direction you want to grow in. Part of this for me is that I just prefer consumer choice over a government mandate of the government telling you, 70% of the American people have private insurance through their employer. And many of them, if not most, are satisfied with that. The deductibles are creeping up. There are other problems that we've got to address. But to force all of those people who are satisfied off of that into Medicare is, to me, a bridge too far. So we'll have a big discussion about that, I'm sure. This committee also does all of the climate issues. So I'm on the energy subcommittee, and I know that's a issue for New Hampshire, high energy costs, but at the same time, we're trying to save the planet and reduce fossil fuels. And so you've heard again about the Green New Deal, which is, in my view, aspirational. I think what you're likely to see come out of our committee is something that we may call the Clean New Deal. And I see Rob Warner, and we had a great event out at NHTI with the environmental groups and the group of people talking about this. In New Hampshire, for example, I want to make sure that we include bioenergy, hydro. I've just been up on the dams up on the Connecticut River. I want to make sure it's inclusive of these other non-fossil fuels so that we can grow that way. And again, I don't think we're going to wake up in 10 years where we're all just solar and wind. I think 40% of the energy produced in New Hampshire is from nuclear energy, which is fossil-free. You may have feelings about the future of nuclear energy, but right now that's happening and should be counted into the mix. So again, we can get further into it in the questions if you're interested. One of the other pieces that we're involved with, you've probably heard about the infrastructure package, and we had a little dust up this week on that with the president storming out of the meeting. And Nancy Pelosi saying her prayers for him. But I think I expect that people will get back to the table on, it's such a big bipartisan issue. And not just roads and bridges and highways, that's very important, but airports, rural broadband is a big piece of this that I'm involved with. I'm just joined a rural broadband caucus that's being led by the whip, Mr. Clyburn. And so we passed, we had a big hearing, and it'll pass in June, out of our committee, something called the LIFT Act, Leading Infrastructure for Tomorrow's America. And it had all of this in there, expanding broadband, internet access. We had healthcare, public health, and funding in there for hospitals, rural hospitals, but also threats to public health and making sure we have the infrastructure, the computers, the connections to be able to respond to, Ebola or whatever is the next thing. And we had some of the climate issues included in that. So that's a big, big package. Then the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee will add the bulk of that. But happy to talk, and I was just talking to Byron and Tim about Tim's op-ed in the Concord Monitor about I-93 coming through Concord. I thought he did a great job, and I'm happy to get involved with Commissioner Sheehan at the DOT, who I've worked with on the funding down on Interstate I-93 down in the Salem region. We were able to bring $200 million to finish that project. And I'd like to work with all of you to make sure that if this goes forward, or when it goes forward in Concord, that we have community input on making it a beautiful gateway to the city. One other issue that just happened yesterday, a big retirement improvement, and this was virtually unanimous. I think 8 people voted against it. I'm not even sure why. It was unanimous coming out of Ways and Means. We call it the Restore Act, but basically what it does is make, for small businesses in particular, and people who are in business for themselves, make the retirement savings options much easier to use and more accessible. So that's something that I think will probably pass out of the Senate. We keep looking for these opportunities. I should have mentioned lowering the cost of prescription drugs. We put a whole bunch of bills out from our committee on generics and competition and how we can bring down the costs. Bipartisan, again, you hear Republicans and Democrats talking about it. And look, my own view is we should try to get whatever we can through the House to the Senate, through the Senate to the President. And if he has a big ceremony on the lawn and takes credit for it all, that's fine by me. At least we are moving the country forward. So I don't think we should get hung up on who gets the credit for it. I think we should just get the job done for all of you. So of a long list of, I don't think I'll go through it all, but just funding that, basically the message to you is that my office is here to help you with projects to bring federal funding to New Hampshire. I know Steve is one of the most adept at a lot of these programs, but for example, we've done a lot, U.S. Department of Agriculture bringing rural development funding. This doesn't always apply to the city of Concord, but surrounding towns are all eligible for that. Land and water conservation funding. We've had projects all over the district for that. The community-oriented policing COPS program is something that we've gotten behind, and the list honestly goes on and on. So I'm going to move right along here. Let's see, the Northern Borders Regional Commission, that's, it doesn't cover Merrimack County, but the surrounding counties up north. We were able to do, for example, a brand-new opioid treatment facility in Bethlehem, New Hampshire called Friendship House. The opioid issue is something that I've been very, very involved in for the last 5 years. I co-chair a task force. We started out calling it the heroin task force. Now it's the opioid task force to broaden to fentanyl and the synthetics. But we have 105 members of Congress working together on both sides of the aisle. And I think just to give you a sense that there are things that are moving forward, we've had great success passing legislation. And yesterday I introduced what we need is more funding, more robust funding to these community solutions. And I really hope this story will come out during the presidential primary. Last cycle, we put it on the map. I remember doing an event with Chris Christie, and we got people talking about it, got the president talking about it. But this cycle, I want them to understand that New Hampshire was one of the hardest hit, but we will lead the country out of this. We've got innovative solutions that are really making a difference in people's lives. And I think this hub and spoke model, I've been over at Riverbend meeting with them. I've been visiting all around my district. But the safe stations in Nashua and Manchester, we have a lot of ideas that have come up from the sort of community level that can be really instrumental to other parts of the country. And so we're going to move forward with all of that. So this bill yesterday with a colleague, Brian Fitzpatrick, who's a Republican from Pennsylvania, he is my co-chair on the task force, and this would be $5 billion a year for 5 years. So it would really start to get more money out. At this point, up until now, we did $1 billion and then we did $2 billion, but by the time it trickles all the way down to the communities, I think there's more that we can do for education and prevention, but also increasing access to treatment and long-term recovery, recognizing that this is not a 28-day one-and-done operation, that we need recovery housing, we need to help people. And I want to commend the governor on his program about supported employment. And if any of you are in a position to work with that, I visited up in Lebanon the other day, if you know a company named Hypertherm. And it's a really terrific company and very innovative and caring about employees. That they have an ESOP where the employees own the company. But I met the most fascinating guy who works for Hypertherm. He's on the board of the local mental health center, and they are doing supported employment at Hypertherm. They're going to have a LADAC counselor available in-house, and just helping people stay in their recovery and be successful in their employment. And when you think about the impact of that, of people being able to get back to work, take care of their families, be successful in the community, pay their taxes, as compared to the model of, sending everybody off to jail where they're not getting any treatment. And then I'll close with this is my game changer idea, but again, this is a community idea. It started in Sullivan County, it's now moved to Merrimack County. And if you have not yet met Ross Cunningham, who's working for the Merrimack County, this was an incredible, innovative solution. He was in Sullivan County, and this goes back like 6 or 7 years when they were hit, Claremont, Newport, hit hardest and earliest when the drugs were coming up. I-91, you remember Vermont was hit very hard. And they were looking at the numbers, planning their budget. They would have had to build a 200-bed prison in this teeny little county. They had no money for that at the rate that the arrests were going. And they said, you know what, these are all drug arrests. Let's try to approach this differently. And instead, they built a scaled-down, it almost looks like a little boarding school. It's like a dormitory. It's got bedrooms. It's got a kitchen. It's got a gymnasium. It's got classrooms. And they brought the treatment in-house. They had plenty of time. And he said one of the things was we had a very low no-show rate, meaning people showed up for their classes, which usually gets a chuckle but when you think about it, it's hard to be in recovery in New Hampshire when it's snowing and you've just gotten home and the kids are hungry and you don't have a babysitter, and it's hard to stick with it. So they spend the time, mental health, group therapy, individual therapy, medically assisted treatment, getting people squared away before they leave. And then the key to the whole system is for an entire year afterward, they stay with them in terms of support. What are the hurdles to your successful recovery? Can we help you with a car? Can we help you get a job? Can we help you if you have to move to a new community because there are bad influences where you were? And the punchline to this story is they dropped the recidivism rate of going back to jail from the 80th percentile to the 20th percentile. And I don't care if you're left, right, or center, it is a waste of our tax dollars to lock people up and not give them any treatment or any mental health. In New Hampshire, we live, all across the country, we live with these 80% recidivism rates. And in New Hampshire, and I think this is true elsewhere, we have an 80 to 90% rate of co-occurring mental health and substance misuse in our prison population. So it turns out, I had been learning about this from Ross, I had been studying this, talking to the psychiatry department up at Dartmouth, talking to all these people, and at the crux of this is a decision 50 years ago that when Congress passed Medicaid, they had a carve-out for health care during incarceration. So at any level, state, county, federal, the day you walk in, you lose your health coverage, your Medicaid or your private coverage. And I think the theory was, we'll have an infirmary inside. If you have a headache or a broken arm, we'll take care of you. But multiply this out across this country for 50 years, inadequate mental health, zero substance use treatment. And then we all act shocked when they come out and go back to their addiction. We wouldn't be shocked if they went back to their diabetes. And so the point is, we have legislation to remove that exemption and to have Medicaid follow the person, get the funding, because there's not a state or a county in the country that's paid to do this, other than Ross Cunningham. They're starting it in Rhode Island. And the bottom line is, we can empty out the prisons. You know, we can, I mean, obviously there's crime, and I'm not suggesting that we don't deal with that, but already there are 2 headlines in the Union Leader in the last month, one at the Valley Street Jail in Manchester, and the other that I think at Rockingham and Hillsborough County, just by the drug courts, the mental health courts, the census is already dropping so dramatically that they're going back in for their budget hearings saying we don't need as much money. And think about what our community could look like. Think of all those families that are struggling, all those grandparents raising grandchildren, if we could help people to get well. So I'll end on that, and we'll take it from there. Tim's keeping track of the time, but I am happy to take a few questions.
Annie,
Can I have to blow this, the fact?
That's going to be my question.
Yeah, no, it's Steve.
we appreciate your help when we're trying to interface with the federal government. I think Commissioner Sheehan and her team over at DOT realizes that their first pass at designing 93 for Concord was, in a word, a disaster.
Yeah.
This community has been unanimous in saying they don't get it, because what they focus on is just the cost of the road.
Right.
What we're insistent on, because of the separation of the river and because we are the state capital that should have an aesthetic quality, is that we want a transformative project like Providence.
Yes.
With Providence, the federal government helped pay to move the river.
Yes, yes.
And
Yeah.
so the project, the DOT keeps looking at the project as a $350 million project. In our scope, based on the 2020 work done a decade ago, which your mom and dad were involved in.
Yes, back in the day,
ago,
yeah.
It's a $700 million project.
Yeah.
In all likelihood, with about half of that doing things like helping Unitil relocate stations, compressing the road, connecting to the river, and it's going to be imperative that when DOT and Governor Sununu supports that kind of vision, that when DOT keeps talking about designing a highway,
Yeah.
that you make sure you keep focused on saying, is Concord on board with this plan? Because
Yeah.
we're not going to, this community does not want to support a plan that just jams
Jams a highway through. Yeah.
to move traffic
Yeah.
along.
And I think what I need to do is work with her to identify other funding, because she's looking at it and I've heard, by the way, Tom from my team is here, and he was at the meetings, and, you know, her vision, her task is to increase the flow of traffic through Concord, period, the end. Like DOT is not responsible for the aesthetics, but we can work together and figure out a way. And this is where, you know, if we get earmarks back, it would help a whole heck of a lot.
Well, you know, the Tiger-
So, and the tire, I mean, we can get
Tiger's not
that, right, exactly. And I think we were very, very innovative in getting this funding. It was, I had a staffer who now works at the Department of Transportation who figured out a way to bring in an extra $200 million that she was not anticipating. So we are in a very good place with her to work and to, I'll go back to him and figure out, you know, how we can identify funding for all of these things. They're so critically important.
When we had our first meeting, she kept saying, no, DOT is going to want the build grant to help do the highway. We kept saying, no, it's going to be one ask for the whole project.
Right.
You're doing your part and leaving us. You know, they tried the three-person committee, Andy Walensky was head of it, rejected. They didn't even bring it for a vote because it was so unpopular. It's got to be an all-in-one, we'll pat you on the back and wish you good luck not really getting your funding to do it.
Right. No, put it together as a package. Yeah.
Sometimes the highway folks keep thinking about traffic, they don't think about.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And, you know, it wasn't going through the city at all, but I will say what they ended up doing down in Salem that had some complications. They had to go pretty far from the highway in terms of the intersections, and it looks beautiful. So I think if we can work with them in that scope, not just narrowly down the middle. Yeah, thank you.
I'm very concerned that we're in a position now where we are virtually closing local markets to producers and farmers, and then we're spending taxpayer dollars hurting our consumers in the meantime, and then spending taxpayer dollars to bail them out. Why are we doing this?
I could not agree with you more. Elections matter. That's as political as I'll get. Yeah, and by the way, I see support for your position on both sides of the aisle in Congress, and you know, it's also very ironic that the administration would be coming to us to try to vote for the new USMCA, the Mexico-Canada-US treaty, while taking steps to blow up the markets and increase the tariffs. So it's a controversial time, and I think you're starting to see different factions push back very hard on, because it is, they're going to be winners and losers, but there are more losers at this point. And for New Hampshire, you know, not just, I mean, a lot of our products are sold overseas, and a lot of our products are going to be hit very hard. What I didn't know about until I got involved in visiting so many companies is that we have a very high number, I think over 200 companies that are vendors to their suppliers. Well, the Siegels are involved in this, but suppliers to the auto industry, and those are all getting hit. We have timber and wood products; those are getting hit. We have dairy, and I've been, you know, the poor dairy farmers all across this country. But all of these steps are making it much, much more difficult. So, and then some very high tech. We mentioned earlier about New Hampshire has a number of medical device companies and sort of medical high tech, and you know, these are markets that we want to have open. And my own position is I'm all about fair trade. I want to make sure that when we negotiate these treaties, we're taking into account environmental protections, labor protections. But I'm glad to get the recognition, because I'm all about trade, and then I'm not about slapping on getting into a tariff war back and forth that, you know, thank God none of you are growing soybeans, because this is a really, really rough time. And then to come back to us and ask us to fund, you know, yeah, I totally agree.
Hi, thank you for being here, and I had the opportunity earlier to thank you on behalf of the New Hampshire Humanities, which I am fortunate enough to chair the board, for your support of the arts and humanities. And as the creative economy that we are in Concord especially, thank you again. But my day job is with Consolidated Communications, and I just wanted to make you aware, arm you, if you will, with a New Hampshire solution that we've come up with about broadband.
Good.
Rural broadband.
Oh my gosh, Tom is going to get your card.
In New Hampshire, the legislature last year passed legislation that enables public-private partnerships with small towns especially
Yep.
to get broadband out there. And Consolidated is partnering with the town of Chesterfield.
Yes, I was just going to say that, yeah.
And, we'd love
Yeah,
to
it's a
talk-
great model. I would love to, it's just so distressing. I've been over a number of times to Peterborough with these big events with the realtors, and they have, $300,000-$400,000 homes that can't be sold because there's no broadband access. And people move from away and they come here. And what I've said recently is that these presidential candidates, this issue is going to move up the agenda because they're all going to be driving around, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? And I think, we'll start to get more attention to it. But I'm delighted that our whip, so that's the number 3 person in the Democratic caucus, Jim Clyburn from South Carolina, is really taking the lead on this. And I'm going to be right there with them every step of the way because it's a huge frustration. And we're not going to, you cannot grow your economy, to say nothing of our youth. I mean, what's the point of education when, kids are having to go down and park in the car and behind the library to do their homework? We've got to make sure that people get the access they need.
And what we need to do is make sure that people have it in their minds that a technology that was there 5 years ago when they started complaining about not having broadband has changed dramatically.
Right, I totally agree.
And so
There's many
I'm
more
working with
options.
Peterborough and saying, please engage us, engage
Yeah.
the other providers, because no longer is it 3 meg to your
Yeah.
residence, it is 50 or 100 meg.
Yes, yep, no, let's do that. And Tom is the person in our office that's been working on it, so we'd love to get together. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll start echoing that your support of arts and humanities has been stellar. You have a great rating with us, just like you do with small business, and we really do appreciate that. That comes from your heart as well. But I want to move back to healthcare and just say, the Capital Center for the Arts, you're celebrating our 25th birthday next year.
Wow.
I know, isn't that
Wow,
amazing?
that's
Yeah.
so great.
And so we have a hardworking, wonderful staff. Many have been with us a long time. Getting a healthcare package for a small company, particularly when you're a nonprofit, it is just your choices is bad, worse, or just awful. I mean,
Yeah,
it is,
yeah.
There's not even anything that you can remotely afford now without deductibles being so crazy large.
Yeah,
We've tried
yeah.
to counter it by covering some of this. Usually not everybody in your company gets sick, but in a small company, it can happen. And
Yeah.
so I just echo any of,
Yeah.
I want to encourage you all to work on
So that's precisely the type of person and employer that this option, this Medicare option, could be effective for. And honestly, what I have found is that seniors on Medicare are the happiest people with their health care, like compared to everybody else. And you may have to buy supplemental, or there may be a piece of it that you need to fill in, but you have access to a good network. You have the physicians you want, the hospitals you want, and part of what I've been doing is going around to the healthcare providers and meeting with the hospitals and the physicians and the mental health centers to say, if we went this route, would that work for you? Are the reimbursement rates sufficient for you? And for the most part, the answer is yes. So I think that's why I say it would be a good option for those who don't have good choices right now, but it wouldn't upend the whole system. Yeah.
We close 8:45.
Oh my gosh, you are good. You are good. Thank you very much. I apologize. Thank you.
So So thank you, our sponsors. Thank you, Congresswoman. And just want to bring to your attention, our next forum will be on energy in June. And Bree, what is the date on that? June 13th. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And have a great Memorial Day weekend.